Hi there. Today we're looking at how to sew this beautiful haute couture prom dress with draping details. It is easy and beginner friendly. If this is something you'd love to do, stick and stay and let's do it together. Before we'll be able to sew this beautiful style, we first would have to take our body measurement. In this instance, I'm using the half scale dummy, and these are the body measurements that we'll be using. The bust is 17, the waist is 12 and a half, the hip 17 3/4, the shoulder to shoulder is 7 and a half, across back 6 and a half, the across chest is 6, around arm 6 and a half, the shoulder to nipple 5 and a half, the shoulder to waist 8, shoulder to hip 12. After having this measurement, we will first calculate 10% of the horizontal measurement, and so the 17 inches for the bust will now give us 15.3. that is after calculating 10% of it. How do you calculate the 10%? It would be 10 over 100 times 17, which is the measurement for which we are calculating the 10%, and so it would be 10 over 100 times 17, and that would give us 1.7. Then we subtract 1.7 from 17, and that would give us 15.3. When we go to 12 and a half, which is the waist, it would also be 1.25 minus 12.5 or 12 and a half, and that would give us 11.25, same as 11 and a quarter. This is not difficult at all. It only takes a bit of time, and this is because of the stretchy nature of our skin net. Now we continue with the 10% for the rest of our horizontal measurement, as you can see them. So 10% would make it conform to the body contours as we so desire. Bear in mind, we have this type of skin net which is of a higher quality, very stretchy and durable. It hardly tears off as compared to these type of skin nets we have on the market that easily tears apart when put under pressure. In case you want to know where we got this, I'll put the link in the description box so you could follow up to get one. We mark this to serve as our starting line. Then we divide our shoulder to shoulder into 2 and mark. Then we mark our shoulder slope. After that, we mark our neck width divided by 2. Then we connect from the neck width to the shoulder. Then we divide our around arm measurement into 2, and then we square this off. After that, we mark our shoulder to nipple, then our shoulder to waist, then we add our shoulder to hip. Bear in mind, no seam allowance is added. We square all these off. At the top here, we move upwards by about 1 inch. Then we square that off as well. This is to give the high rise of the built-up neck collar. Then we connect it this way. It's supposed to be a bit rounded, and so we join it using an arc to smoothen that very corner. The next thing would be to divide our arm depth by 3. We square that off, and that will be our cross back across chest line. And so we divide our cross back into 2 and mark. Then our bust measurement divided by 4. With these 3 points, we're going to mark our armhole curve. This is our bust divided by 4. Then we move to our waist divided by 4, and then the hip divided by 4. Because of the stretchy nature of our fabric, we are not adding any seam allowance to it, so we join these points. Now we would want our dress to move a bit below our hip line, and so we're moving about 2 inches. You do 4 inches in a regular dress. This is the hip divided by 4. We connect that to, and since it has to be a bit rounded, curvy, it shouldn't be, with straight lines like this, and so you smoothen it. Then we go ahead and cut this out. Right, so we open this up and then we align them. Now we're going to stitch the shoulders. Then we leave the armhole and the neckline, and we stitch the side seams as well. After doing that, this is what we have. You can see. Now we fit it onto our dummy to see if there is any mistake whatsoever. But yes, it fits perfectly well. We cut a fabric, as you can see, the length and then the width. Then we're going to measure from the side seam to this very side seam. We measure the bust, and then we would also move ahead and then measure the waist. And we use this to cut these fabrics, but we've made sure we folded one edge, that is the down part, and then the top part would also be this very portion. When we are to fit it at the back, this is what we have. And so we're supposed to cut at the center back, and so I'm drawing that line, and then we cut this. So we have 2, one for the front, one for the back, and then we stitch the side seams. After stitching the side seams, we'll come and then fit it onto the dummy again, making sure that we align the side seam to the side seam of the dummy, and then we pin it. In case your dummy is not pinnable, it's not a problem. All that you do is that you pin it onto the net, that is the skin net you have. Since ours is pinnable, we're able to push the pin through the dummy. And so whether you have a pinnable dummy or this plastic dummy type, you can do this very style. It shouldn't stop us from doing it. Alright, so after we get this, now we'll go ahead and stitch the fabric onto the skin net until we're using a whip stitch or a blind stitch. Any of them you can just use. All we need is to stitch the fabric onto the skin net. Very, very, very easy. It's time consuming though, but it's very easy to do, and you'd love it after you're done, trust me. Right, after this, we're going to mark the top of the neckline, let me call it, and then we cut that out. We make sure that the other side is of the same length. I think this is a bit up, so we need to recut it. And we do same for the other side. So I'm taking this measurement and then we just oppose it with the other side, and we'll cut this off as well. Now we are slitting through the skin net all the way to the top. That is using the marking we had marked earlier. This is to enable us to take the skin net off our dummy. And so we're just removing it off so that you go ahead and then stitch. Before we do that too, we'd also want to get the fabric that will be used for the draping. The length should also be reasonably long so that after we are done with the draping, we'll still have excess. We marked the center front of it, and then we mark the center front of the dress as well. As you can see, we're creating a notch there so that we're able to align the two notches. And so we're going ahead to stitch these. Let's first stitch that which we had hand stitched onto the skein net. So we've opened what we folded initially, and that is what we are stitching. After that, we can take off the hand stitches. Then we'll do the stitching for the fabric that we'll be using for the draping on the top. There are two methods to do this draping, and in this video we are making sure that we do these two methods. And so this is one of the methods, but we are first stitching this onto the dress. That is our fabric. We're stitching it onto the top of our dress. Then we'll move on to see how we do the draping. So this is it, neatly stitched onto the other fabric. To make the edge stay quite well, we need to do an understitching where we stitch the seam allowance onto the dress itself. So we're pushing all the seam allowance from the left to the right, as you see in the video. This is what I meant. We'll go ahead and press this. Then we'll fit it onto our dummy again. In case you have a pinnable dummy, you can just pin it. If not, you use thread and needle, and then you stitch these two to close the opening. Because our dummy is pinnable, we are just pinning them close, as you can see. And so, as I said earlier, whether you have a pinnable dummy or not, you can do this style. Right, so we're making sure that it's sitting quite well on the dummy before we start with the draping itself. And so you pin it or you stitch it so that it conforms to the body shape. Now we start with a drape. Usually you need the help of a colleague, to do these drapes, because one person would have to be holding a certain part, doing the pinning, and then it's quite difficult to do it all by yourself, though it's possible. Right. And so you continue with a drape. After you do one, then you press. This is to make sure there are no locks in there. If you need to adjust it, you adjust. After we're done with one, I prefer to pin them down. And so if your dummy is not pinnable, what you can do is that you pin it across. As I have pinned it into the dummy, you can just pin them across, and it would also work perfectly fine. And so this is our next drape. We're just pleating them. You understand? We're just pleating them, and then we press. You pleat them, then you press. If you don't want this to be the last video you see from us, then hit the subscribe button before you forget. We've got loads of educative content coming your way. Once it has to do with sewing, we are there. After we're done with this drape, we cut the base, as you see me do. Then we're making sure that we secure the tops of our drapes, that is the top part of the pleats that we created. And so for each of them, we are stitching them you take the pins out. Then this is to make sure that as we are about to remove the dress from the dummy, we wouldn't destroy the pleats that we created. This is very easy to do, though time consuming. And it's also fun. You'd love it. We are making sure that we stitch it for all the pleats that we created. As I said, this is one type of drape that we can do. Now we're taking off our dress from the dummy. Once we've secured these very portions, now when we flip it over like this, we see this. Then we'll go ahead and stitch the base all the way to the other side. After that, we'll take this very one off. That is the hemming we did here. We'll take it off so that we get access to the base of the second one as well. And then we'll also go and then stitch that part. Then we'll take the next one off. Then we'll do the same and repeat till we get to the top here. So this is the very first one that we are stitching. We stitch this. Then we take off the hand stitches or the hemming we did initially when the dress was on the dummy. We take all the stitches off, giving us access to the base of the next pleat we created. Then we stitch that too. We repeat this for the other pleats created. In each of the steps, we take our stitches off, giving us access to the base of that pleat. Then we stitch it down. After everything, we put it back onto our dummy, give it a good press. You can steam it if you have a steamer. If you don't, it's alright to also use your press and iron. We're cutting this off so that we're able to fold and finish the edge of our drapes. With the help of a hem tape, I want to secure the base. And so I just insert the hem tape all through, and then I apply some heat so that it stays. After that, you're not done. You'd go ahead and then do some hemming. That is, you do a blind hemming down there so that it doesn't, go off. You wouldn't want to do stitches so that it wouldn't show on the good side. But with a blind hem, you're able to secure the last pleat we did. After everything, we take off our dress from the dummy again. And so it's just going to be back and forth, as you see. And that's the more reason why you need to use a very good skin net. Now with the skirt part, this is our waist, this is our hip, then our dress length, that is our skirt length. This is the hip divided by 4, our waist divided by 4, and then we have this curve. We bring our hip measurement to the base as well, then we cut this off. This is not the full length of the skirt. This is just about 8 inches below the hip line, but for this dummy it's 4 inches. That's half of the 8. We're going ahead to stitch one side of the skirt, then we wrap that around our dummy. We can pin this if your dummy is pinnable, but I've decided to just stitch it using a running stitch. This is just to fit the skirt onto the dummy, so that we do the next draping I was talking about. So this is what we have. Now we are cutting this crossway strips or bias strips into 2.5 inches width, and that is because of this half scale dummy I'm using. You may want to do 5 inches depending on how big you want the pleats to be. I want them to be 1 inch, and so I'm doing 2.5 so that when I fold them I have 1.25. I'll stitch 1/4 inch and then I would have 1 inch, left to expose. And so I'll place them onto the dress form, as you want it to be. Then you mark the base so that you know exactly where to place them. You make sure that the side which we did the hand stitching, the 2 strips would meet exactly on the same line, as you can see, because you don't want to stitch it and then one strip would be up, the other below. No. If your dummy is pinnable, as mine, you can just pin them. It makes it quite easier. If it's not, you can still pin them across the lines, but then you make sure that you don't pin it through to the skin net, because we want this to be attached to only the skirt that has been placed on top. That's what we have. In case you also don't want to pin, you can as well use the thread and needle to also stitch it. We make sure that we mark the center front, the side seam, and then the center back. I also made sure that I run overlock stitches on the edges of my bias strips. Because of the video, that's why I did white overlock stitches. It would be more appropriate to do it in the same color as the fabric so that it wouldn't even show. So now we are placing the next set of strips, and all these ones look exactly as though they have been draped. When you compare this with the very first ones we did, you don't really see any difference in it. And so when you do it this way, it's a bit easier, I would say. You also make sure that for each of them, we mark the center front, the center back, the side seam. And then we also mark the down part. That is where the overlock is done. And this is to make sure that when we take the whole thing off and then we are taking it to our sewing machine, in case anything shifts, we're able to see where exactly it's supposed to align, onto the base of the skirt that we have. So that's why we're marking the down parts of the strips when we are placing them on the skirt. After this, we're taking off our side stitches, that is the hand stitches we did. so that we're able to take off the skirt from the dummy. And so the pins that we have just pinned them onto the dummy, that is what we are taking off. And so when we remove them like this, as you see the pins, appearing at the back, we need to realign them. That is, we pin them, along the strips. All right. And so if you had also done the stitching or the pinning along as we had advised for those who would use the plastic mannequins, I think this part would save us quite a bit. Then we're going ahead to stitch them onto the skirts, starting from the bottom one. Then we move to the next and also stitch. So we just repeat them till we exhaust everything, but we also make sure that we don't stitch to the very first one. When we get there, you see it. We wouldn't stitch to the very first strip that we have, because it will be used to finish the skirt up, and so we wouldn't stitch that very one. And so this, which is the second one, is the last one we are doing when it comes to this stitching. Right. And so we left it there because we're going to shape it just as we had for the skirt. It should have the same shape as the skirt, and so that's what you see here. Now we go ahead and take the very first bias strip we cut, then the marking that we already had there, this very marking, we add 1/4 inch allowance to the top. That would be for stitching the very first one actually. And so we'll go ahead and cut this. That is the allowance we are just placed on. You'll cut this. Then when we get to the dummy, we are closing the center back of the skin net. That is the skirt part only, not through to the top. This is because we are going to fit the skirt onto the skirt part of our dummy, onto the down part of our dummy actually. Right, you're going to do this. And since there was no opening at the center back of the skirt that has the draping on, it was appropriate to close the skin net. Now we are marking where exactly we had added our 1/4 inch to the skirt we just did. So we pull off the bias strip so that we get access to the base itself. So this is it. We'd also mark this, and then we add 1/4 inch allowance to it. Now we'll go ahead and cut the 1/4 inch allowance we just added. We cut it all through. And this was the only reason why we stitched the back. So now we can open it up again and then take off the whole skin net from the dummy. But after taking it off, when we come to the sewing machine, we'll stitch the center back of the skin net again. It's quite interesting. If we had not unseam it, we couldn't have taken it off the dummy. Now we are opening it on the side seam, just as we have for the skirt that we've done the draping on. We are opening the side seam of the skin net so that we are able to attach the skirt part to it, not the drape, but then the one to which we had the last strip. So we match the side seam of the skirt to the side seam of the skin net, and then we move ahead to stitch them together. Bear in mind, the stitching is not done to the wrong side, rather we are stitching with the seam allowance coming to the good side. This is to ensure that it has a neat finish. And so we are attaching the skin net to the skirt. Since the seam allowance is to the good side like this, now we are going to place the last strip that we took off, this very strip. Then we match the side seam to the side seam. And so this is how we're going to do the stitching. Then the center front to the center front, the side seam to the side seam, the center back to the center back. We just align them in that order. I prefer to stitch the ending first, so that by the time we are done stitching the whole thing, there wouldn't be any excess left. And so we now come and start from the beginning. That is the right side of our side seam. We are stitching from that very portion all the way to the other side. Right, then we do a top stitching so that it lies flat, and that will allow the second strip to fall on it perfectly well without seeing any difference. And so this is what we have neatly done. Now we are to insert our zipper. This is the length of the zipper we want. Would mark it, and since there is no opening at the center back of the skirt, and since there are pleats, we'd have to stitch the pleats down. So we are stitching 2 flat fail seams, that is 2 lines, so that we're able to place our zipper without any problem. So we stitch these 2 lines so that that part of the pleats would be able to lie low without any hindrance to fixing the zippers. Fixing the zipper actually. To make sure that you avoid bulging, when you measure the distance to which you are fixing the zipper, you make sure that you reduce it by half when marking it onto the zipper. And so in this instance, the length for the space to which we are fixing the zipper was 10.5, and then we made sure that we marked 10 inches on the zipper itself. So the zipper was going to be 1/2 inch shorter than the space in the dress to which we are going to fix the zipper. And that means we have to stitch the end first before we start from the beginning. So that's exactly what we are doing. Right, so after we stitch this, we'll close the zipper. Then we mark where the top part of the dress, where the two are meeting, then where it's supposed to end, that is on the skin net. We match them together. Then we flip the zipper on the other side like this, and we pin it accordingly, so that by the time we are done, one zipper wouldn't be up and the other down. That is the dresses. Yes, so we are aligning them exactly as you see. Then we'll go ahead, You stitch the end first, then you go and start from the beginning. Because this is a half scale dummy, it's actually difficult doing the stitching because the dress is not that big, and so forcing your way through it is quite, a challenge, but it's all part of the fun. It's so much fun doing this. Right. And so once it's aligned well, we'll go ahead and slit through the center back, and then we meet the corners. When it gets to where our stitching ended for the zipper, we meet the corners, as you can see. Now we can close our zipper. And this is what we have. We flip it over so that we secure the base of the zipper. Right. Now we'll put this onto our dummy again. Then we've already cut our skirt. It's just a straight skirt cut, making sure that it gets to the length you want. And then you just place it onto the dummy again. Then the marking of the last bias strip that we have, you also mark just along that line onto the new skirt you just placed on. Then we're going to cut this, but then we are adding about 1/2 inch to the top of it, of what we just marked. I'll show it to you in a minute. So this is it. We cut along the allowance instead. This is what we're going to have when we wrap it on. Now, we are taking it off and then back onto our sewing machine. Then, this is how we're going to stitch. We're marking about 1/2 inch more because we want the skirt part to also look as though it's another pleat. And so we're not placing the skirt just right down, but then about 1/4 inch upwards. And when we do it for this side, we mark the same for the other side as well. So this is where we are placing it. Then we'll go ahead and stitch it onto the top skirt. Quite an interesting dress, I must say. So this is what we have, but then we want to extend the zipper further down so that opening it becomes easier. So I would have to unseam this. I didn't know this initially, but I realized it was good that I did. We open this up, then we feather stitch our zipper down. But before that, we need to cut off this excess of the first skirt we created. Then we'll go to our overlock machine and then knitting that very joining. We'll go and stitch it. This is what we have. Now we want to extend our zipper opening to this very portion. So we pin that, and then we'll go ahead and stitch all the way to that side. This is just as we did for the zipper ending from the beginning. This is just an extension. So we further cut it downwards and then we meet the corner as we did in a short while. We can then close our zipper, push it through, and then now we close our zipper entirely. We need to finish the base of the zipper. So this is what we have. Now we cut the excess. You can neaten it, finish it up neatly. Now we measure the side slit for the skirt, and then we cut a fabric into this very shape. It unfolds actually, and so we're using the side seam for the length we are marking. We add just about half into it so that we would use it for finishing the hem. So that's it. We're going to finish the hem. After finishing the hem, we fold it over as we had it initially. Then we're going to fix that onto one side of the skirt. It could be the front, it could be the back. It doesn't really matter. So we just fix it. Then we'll take this to our sewing machine and stitch. After stitching, we bring it back and then pin the other side of the skirt also onto it. Then go ahead and stitch this side too. Now for the sleeve, we need to have 2 circle skirts. Yes, 2 circle, 360 degrees fabric. But then the very small part is supposed to equal that of the armhole. And so when we are to place this onto our armhole, this is what we have. Right, now we're going to run 2 loose stitches on the edge so that we're able to gather. We gather the bigger part of the 360 skirt. Sorry for calling it 360 skirt. But then we fold that, we gather that till we get the same shape as that of the part we didn't, gather. Then we'll come and attach it to our armhole. We insert it as our sleeve. Then we'll work ourselves through it. Right, so after stitching this, we do a top stitch onto the skin net. This is to make sure that when the person wears it, the rough edges of the gathered piece wouldn't come out, and so we're rather top stitching it onto the shoulder part of the skin net. Right, then we'll do tacking of it so that it also covers the top stitching we did on the skin net. So we do this tacking to give it a smock feel or a smock look. Then we do our embellishment, and so we place this plastic or rubber just beneath, and then these are rhinestones, and then our patches. We can either use the B6000 or you use the glue gun. In this video I prefer to use the glue gun because it's quite faster But then for longevity reasons, if it were a dress, I would have used the B6000 fabric glue. Right. And so you can just design it as you wish. Just place them on like this. We also have this Hot Fix rhinestone applicator that we use in fixing rhinestones, which has glue at the back. And so you can just use this. And voila, our design, our haute couture is beautifully made. Thank you so much for staying tuned till this time. I so much appreciate you. Thank you. See you.